The Great Hall of Valdres had never hosted a celebration quite like this one. Captain Marcus Thorne stood before the Aetherian Council, still bearing the dust and minor wounds from the siege that had nearly destroyed their ancient fortress city. 3 days of continuous fighting had ended with his impossible victory, a single human mercenary breaking a siege that had lasted 6 months and brought the mighty Aetherian Empire to its knees. "Captain Thorne," proclaimed High Counselor Aldrich, his ethereal features glowing with the inner light characteristic of his people, "your service to our realm deserves reward beyond mere gold or titles. Choose from our treasury, weapons forged in starfire, armor that turns aside any blade, lands that span horizons, or—" He gestured toward a line of noble daughters arranged in order of political importance, "alliance through marriage to one of our finest bloodlines." Marcus surveyed the offered rewards with the practical eye of a career soldier. The weapons were impressive, the lands tempting, and the noble daughters, he studied them carefully. Lady Cassandra stood first in line, tall and proud, her silver hair cascading over armor that marked her as both warrior and aristocrat. Lady Vera held the second position, her violet eyes sharp with intelligence, representing one of the oldest magical bloodlines. Each woman down the line represented power, wealth, or strategic advantage. All except the last one. She stood at the far end, almost hidden behind the others, small, pale, and trembling slightly as if standing upright required tremendous effort. Her dark hair hung like a curtain partially concealing a face that might have been beautiful if not for the exhaustion etched into every feature. While the other women wore fine silks and jewels that announced their status, she was dressed in simple gray cloth that seemed to drain what little color she possessed. "An interesting selection," Marcus said, his voice carrying easily through the hall's perfect acoustics. "But I'm curious about the woman at the end of the line. She seems different from the others." Whispers rippled through the assembled nobles. High Counselor Aldrich's glow dimmed slightly, a sign of discomfort that Marcus had learned to recognize during their negotiations. "That is Lady Lyanna of House Morwen," Aldrich said carefully. "She is available, certainly, but perhaps not the most advantageous choice for a man of your accomplishments." "In what way?" "She suffers from a wasting condition that has left her fragile. Her family line, while ancient, carries certain complications that many find troubling." The High Counselor's tone carried the diplomatic weight of significant understatement. "Perhaps Lady Cassandra would better suit a warrior of your stature." Marcus looked again at the trembling woman in gray. Something about her posture caught his attention. The way she held herself despite her obvious exhaustion suggested a different kind of strength than the martial prowess displayed by the other noble daughters. "What kind of complications?" he asked. The whispers grew more urgent. Several nobles exchanged glances that Marcus couldn't interpret, but their discomfort was obvious. "Ancient bloodlines sometimes carry unusual gifts," Aldrich replied with even more careful diplomacy. "Gifts that can be as much burden as blessing. Lady Lyanna's particular heritage has left her challenging to manage." Marcus stepped closer to the line of women, noting how they all stood straighter as he approached, all except Lady Lyanna, who seemed to shrink further into herself. "Lady Lyanna," he said gently, and was surprised when she looked up to meet his eyes directly. What he saw there made him pause. Behind the exhaustion and apparent fragility was an intelligence that seemed to peer straight through to his intentions. "Are you willing to be chosen?" Her voice, when she spoke, was barely above a whisper but carried clearly in the silent hall. "I am offered as all the others are, Captain Thorne. Though I wonder why you would consider such a choice when far better options await your selection." "Better in what way?" "Stronger. Healthier. More capable of bearing the children expected of a noble wife. More able to enhance your status rather than diminish it." Each word seemed to cost her effort, but her gaze never wavered from his. Marcus found himself impressed by her honesty. "And what would you bring to such a union, Lady Lyanna?" She was quiet for so long that he began to think she wouldn't answer. When she spoke, her voice carried something he couldn't quite identify, part warning, part sadness, part something else entirely. "I would bring complications, Captain." The kind that have made my own family eager to see me married away, and my potential husband's family equally eager to avoid the alliance. She paused, studying his face with those disconcertingly intelligent eyes. I would bring secrets that are dangerous to know and abilities that are frightening to witness. Abilities? Before she could answer, High Counselor Aldrich stepped forward with obvious urgency. Captain Thorne, perhaps we should discuss the more practical options available to you. Lady Cassandra comes with a dowry that includes 3 provinces and a private army. Lady Vera's family controls the Academy of Mystical Arts. Surely one of these alliances would serve your interests better than. Then what? Marcus asked, his attention still focused on Lady Lyanna. Then choosing someone who speaks honestly about what she offers rather than hiding behind political advantages. The hall fell silent. Marcus realized he was witnessing something beyond a simple reward ceremony. There were currents of fear and politics swirling around this pale woman that ran deeper than mere noble matchmaking. I choose Lady Lyanna, he said clearly. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Several nobles gasped audibly. Others began urgent whispered conferences. High Counselor Aldrich's ethereal glow flickered like a candle in wind. Captain, Aldrich said urgently, are you certain? Perhaps you don't fully understand. I understand that everyone in this hall seems terrified of a woman who can barely stand upright, Marcus interrupted. I understand that she's being offered as a consolation prize because you assume no one would actually choose her. And I understand that there's obviously much more to Lady Lyanna than anyone wants to discuss openly. He looked directly at her, noting how her trembling had stopped and her exhausted features now showed something that might have been hope. The question is, Lady Lyanna, are you willing to accept a husband who chose you not despite your complications, but because of your honesty about them? She stared at him for a long moment, and Marcus had the distinct impression he was being evaluated by someone whose judgment went far beyond the apparent fragility of her physical form. Yes, she said finally, and her voice carried a strength that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than her obviously limited physical reserves. Though I should warn you, Captain Thorne, choosing me will change your life in ways you cannot imagine. Good, Marcus replied with a grin that made several nobles step back unconsciously. I've never been fond of predictable outcomes. As the formal arrangements began amid continued whispered concerns from the assembled, the wedding ceremony was attended by more people than Marcus had expected, though he suspected many came out of morbid curiosity rather than genuine celebration. As he stood beside Lyanna in the ancient chapel of Valdris, he noticed how the other nobles watched them with expressions ranging from pity to fascination to what looked suspiciously like relief that someone else was taking responsibility for the cursed bride. Lyanna wore a simple white dress that somehow made her pale complexion luminous rather than sickly. She still trembled slightly, but Marcus was beginning to suspect the trembling wasn't entirely from physical weakness. During the ceremony, when the priest asked her to place her hand in his, he felt something like an electric current pass between them, not painful, but definitely present. Interesting, she murmured so quietly that only he could hear. That's not supposed to happen. What's not supposed to happen? I'll explain later, she whispered, then spoke her vows in a voice that carried clearly through the chapel despite her apparent frailty. Later came sooner than expected. No sooner had they reached the modest chambers assigned to them than Lyanna collapsed into the nearest chair, her careful composure finally breaking. Are you all right? Marcus asked, moving to her side with concern. It's complicated. She looked up at him with those penetrating dark eyes. Marcus, I need to tell you something important about what you've chosen, but first I need to know, why did you really pick me? Honestly? Because everyone seemed so afraid of you that I figured you must be either dangerous or extraordinary. Either way, more interesting than a straightforward political marriage. Lyanna laughed, a sound like silver bells that seemed to brighten the room despite her exhaustion. Dangerous and extraordinary. You're not wrong on either count. So what's the truth about your complications? She was quiet for a moment, then held out her hand palm up. Touch my hand again, but this time pay attention to what you feel. Marcus placed his palm against hers, and immediately felt that electric sensation, stronger this time. But more than that, he felt a sense of vitality, of energy flowing between them in a way that seemed to strengthen both of them. "What is that?" he asked. "Life force. I can sense it, manipulate it, channel it." As she spoke, the trembling in her hands stopped and some color returned to her cheeks. "But using the ability drains my own life energy, which is why I appear so weak most of the time. Life force manipulation. That sounds powerful. Extraordinarily powerful. And extraordinarily dangerous." She pulled her hand back, and immediately the exhaustion returned to her features. "I can heal wounds that should be mortal, enhance someone's strength beyond normal limits, or..." She paused, meeting his eyes directly. "I can drain the life from someone with a touch." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. And the Aetherian nobles know this? They know enough to be terrified. My great-grandmother once ended a war by walking onto a battlefield and stopping the hearts of an entire enemy regiment. The family has been trying to live down that reputation ever since. Lyanna's voice carried generations of weariness. Most of my relatives hoped I would be born without the gift. When it manifested, they hoped it would be weak. When it proved to be stronger than any in recent memory, they decided the best solution was to marry me off to someone who could manage the situation. Manage meaning control. Or eliminate, if necessary. She said it with such matter-of-fact calm that Marcus realized she'd been living with the possibility of assassination for years. The ability is hereditary but unpredictable. Sometimes it skips generations, sometimes it appears in weakened form. In me, it's... She gestured vaguely. Let's say it's not weakened. Marcus sat down heavily in the chair opposite her. So when the High Counselor offered you as a marriage prize, he was hoping you would either keep me controlled through marriage bonds, or that I would become someone else's problem entirely. Lyanna's smile was bitter. What he didn't expect was for you to actually choose me, or for you to seem genuinely interested in understanding rather than controlling. And the trembling, the apparent weakness? The cost of constantly suppressing my abilities. If I let my power flow freely, I could level this entire fortress. But doing so would likely kill me, and everyone I care about would be caught in the destruction. She leaned back in her chair, suddenly looking even more exhausted. So I keep it contained, which means I always appear to be on the verge of collapse. Marcus tried to process the implications. How much power are we talking about? Enough that ancient enemies of the Aetherian Empire specifically avoid attacking when they know someone of my bloodline is present and uncontrolled. She met his eyes again. Enough that your choice of me as a wife may have just painted a target on both our backs. Explain. There are forces that have been waiting for an opportunity to strike at the Empire when they believe my power is safely contained. A marriage to an outsider, especially a human without magical abilities, might be interpreted as me being neutralized. Lyanna's voice grew more urgent. Marcus, I think the timing of your victory and this reward ceremony may not have been coincidental. Before Marcus could ask what she meant, alarms began sounding throughout the fortress. Through their chamber window, he could see unnatural darkness spreading across the sky like spilled ink. "What is that?" he asked. Lyanna stood up, her exhaustion replaced by grim determination. "That's trouble of the kind that conventional weapons can't handle. The kind that only someone with my abilities has any hope of stopping. And using your abilities at full power would likely kill me." She moved to the window, studying the approaching darkness with professional assessment. But letting that darkness reach the population centers will definitely kill thousands of innocents. Marcus joined her at the window, watching as shapes that seemed to exist only partially in normal reality began emerging from the shadows. "So our honeymoon is about to become a battle for the survival of the kingdom." "I'm afraid so." "Though Marcus..." She turned to look at him, and for the first time since he'd met her, there was no exhaustion in her face, only fierce determination. "I should mention that when I use my abilities at full power, I'm not exactly the fragile woman everyone thinks I am. Good, Marcus said, checking his weapons with practiced efficiency. Because I didn't choose a fragile woman. I chose someone extraordinary. Time to show me what extraordinary looks like. Lyanna's smile was brilliant and slightly terrifying. With pleasure. Though I should warn you, after tonight, the nobles are going to realize that you didn't choose the weakest woman in the line. You chose the most dangerous one. Even better, Marcus replied. I was getting bored with conventional warfare anyway. As the supernatural darkness continued to spread and inhuman shapes began descending toward the fortress, Marcus realized that his instinct to choose the unexpected bride was about to be tested in ways he could never have imagined. The attack came with the methodical precision of something that had been planned for months. From their chamber window, Marcus watched as the unnatural darkness swallowed the outer defenses of Valdris, and the shapes emerging from within it moved with purpose toward the fortress's heart. They're not random monsters, he observed, his tactical mind analyzing the assault patterns. This is organized, strategic. Of course it is, Lyanna said, her voice carrying new strength as she prepared for what was coming. The Shadowborn have been waiting for exactly this opportunity, a moment when they believed my power was safely contained by marriage bonds. Shadowborn? Ancient enemies of life itself. They exist partially outside normal reality, which makes them nearly impossible to harm with conventional weapons. She moved to a chest that Marcus hadn't noticed before, pulling out items that seemed to shimmer with inner light. They feed on life force, growing stronger as they drain the living. A fortress full of people is basically a feast for them. Marcus tested the edge of his sword, then looked at the approaching darkness with professional assessment. What can conventional forces do against them? Delay them. Maybe evacuate civilians. But actually stopping them? Lyanna shook her head. That requires someone who can manipulate life force directly. Someone like you. Someone exactly like me. She turned to face him fully, and Marcus was startled by the transformation. The trembling exhaustion was gone, replaced by a predatory alertness that made her appear far more dangerous than her small frame should have allowed. Marcus, I need to ask something important of you. Anything. I need you to trust me completely, even when what you see doesn't match what you expect. Her dark eyes held his steadily. Using my power at full strength changes me. I become something that frightens most people, including those I'm trying to protect. Before Marcus could respond, General Corvin burst through their chamber door without ceremony. Captain Thorn, Lady Lyanna, we need to evacuate you immediately, the Aetherian military leader announced urgently. The outer perimeter has fallen to some kind of shadow creatures that our weapons can't touch. High Counselor Aldrich wants all civilians moved to the interior bunkers. General, Lyanna said calmly, how many of your soldiers have engaged the Shadowborn directly? 3 squads attempted to hold the outer courtyard. All were drained. The creatures left their bodies intact but somehow empty. Corvin's ethereal glow was dim with stress and confusion. Lady Lyanna, I appreciate your concern, but this is a military matter now. No, General. This is exactly the kind of matter that requires non-military solutions. She moved to the window, studying the advancing darkness with professional interest. Your weapons can't harm them because they exist partially in the life force dimension. You might as well be trying to fight shadows with swords. Then how do we stop them? You don't. I do. Lyanna turned back to them, and Marcus saw something in her expression that made him understand why the nobles had been so afraid of her. But I'll need Marcus with me. Absolutely not, General Corvin said immediately. Lady Lyanna, you're a civilian, and Captain Thorn is too valuable to risk in. General, Marcus interrupted, what's the current casualty projection if these things reach the main population? Conservative estimate. 80% fatalities within 6 hours. And the projection if we evacuate everyone to the bunkers? Corvin's silence was answer enough. Then we try Lady Lyanna's approach, Marcus said decisively. What do you need me to do? Lionel's smile was grateful and slightly wild. Hold my hand and don't let go, no matter what you see or feel. That's your plan? General Corvin asked incredulously. That's the first part of my plan, Lionel corrected. The second part involves me showing these Shadowborn why my family has been feared for generations. She took Marcus's hand, and immediately he felt that electric connection again, but stronger, much stronger. Energy flowed between them in a way that seemed to amplify rather than drain both of them. Interesting, Lionel murmured, her voice carrying new harmonics that seemed to resonate through dimensions Marcus couldn't perceive. This shouldn't be possible. What shouldn't be possible? Power sharing without energy loss. Usually when I channel through another person, it drains both of us. But with you. She squeezed his hand, and Marcus felt strength flowing into him from an inexhaustible source. With you, it's like having a stable foundation that lets me use my abilities without burning out. General Corvin was staring at them with growing comprehension and alarm. Lady Lionel, are you saying that your marriage has somehow enhanced your capabilities? I'm saying that my husband appears to be naturally compatible with life force manipulation in ways I didn't know were possible. Lionel's eyes began to glow with soft silver light. Which means I can use my full power without dying in the process. Is that good or bad? Marcus asked. For us? Very good. For the Shadowborn? Her smile was absolutely terrifying. Very bad. The first of the shadow creatures reached their tower, flowing through the walls like liquid darkness. Marcus felt Lionel's grip on his hand tighten, and suddenly the creature stopped mid-attack, writhing as if in pain. What are you doing to it? He asked. Feeding it more life force than it can process, she replied conversationally, while silver light began emanating from her entire body. Shadowborn are parasites. They're designed to drain small amounts of life energy over time. But if you force-feed them massive amounts all at once, the creature exploded into harmless wisps of dissipating darkness. They overload, Marcus finished, understanding dawning. Exactly. And with you anchoring me, I can channel enough power to overload all of them simultaneously. Lionel's voice now carried harmonics that made the air itself seem to sing. Ready to see what your frail wife is really capable of? Marcus looked at her, silver light radiating from her skin, dark eyes now blazing with power that seemed to peer straight through to other dimensions, small frames somehow containing energy that made the air around them vibrate with potential. I don't think anyone would mistake you for frail right now, he said with genuine admiration. Good. Hold on tight, husband. This is going to be memorable. Lionel raised their joined hands, and silver light exploded outward from them like a miniature star being born. Marcus felt power flowing through him in quantities that should have been impossible for any human to contain, but instead of burning him out, it seemed to strengthen him, as if he was providing the stable foundation that allowed her incredible abilities to manifest safely. Through the window, they could see the silver light spreading across the entire fortress, and wherever it touched the Shadowborn, the creatures writhed and dissipated like smoke in a hurricane. Impossible, General Corvin whispered. In 3 minutes, you've destroyed what an entire army couldn't scratch. Not impossible, Marcus said, watching his wife's power sweep across the battlefield like cleansing fire. Just unexpected. Which seems to be a recurring theme with my choice of bride. Lionel's laugh carried joy and power in equal measure. Marcus, I think our marriage is going. The aftermath of the Shadowborn assault left the fortress in stunned silence. Marcus stood beside Lionel on the main battlement, watching as the last wisps of unnatural darkness dissipated in the morning light. His wife, the word still felt strange but increasingly right, had returned to her normal appearance, though she no longer showed the exhausted trembling that had characterized her before their marriage. Remarkable, she said, studying her own hands with scientific interest. The power drain I usually experience after channeling is completely absent. If anything, I feel stronger than before. Is that normal? Nothing about this is normal, Marcus. Life force manipulation doesn't work the way we just made it work. She turned to him with wonder in her dark eyes. Somehow, our connection allows me to channel massive amounts of power through you as a stable foundation, rather than burning out my own life energy. General Corvin approached them with an expression that mixed relief, awe, and considerable apprehension. Lady Lyanna, Captain Thorn, the fortress is secure. All traces of the shadow creatures have been eliminated. Casualties? Marcus asked. 14 wounded in the initial attack, none fatal. The creatures you destroyed were eliminated before they could drain anyone significantly. Corvin paused, studying Lyanna with new respect and wariness. My lady, I must ask, what you just accomplished, could you do it again if necessary? With Marcus as my anchor? Easily. Though I suspect word of tonight's events will spread quickly. Lyanna's expression grew thoughtful. The Shadowborn weren't acting independently. Someone sent them, someone who believed I was safely neutralized by marriage. Who would do that? Marcus asked. The Void Covenant, General Corvin answered grimly. Ancient enemies of the Empire who've been waiting decades for an opportunity to strike when our most powerful defensive capabilities were compromised. Well, Marcus said with dark humor, they certainly miscalculated. Did they? Lyanna's voice carried concern. Marcus, what we just did proves that our bond enhances rather than contains my abilities. That makes us more dangerous than anyone realized. Dangerous to our enemies. Dangerous to everyone. She moved to the battlement's edge, looking out over the fortress and the lands beyond. My great-grandmother's power was nothing compared to what I just channeled. If I lost control, or if something happened to disrupt our connection while I was channeling. Marcus understood her concern. You're worried about being too powerful. I'm worried about being too powerful and not having enough experience with this level of ability to use it safely. She turned back to him. Marcus, before tonight, the most I'd ever done was heal minor wounds or enhance someone's strength temporarily. What I just did was manipulate life force on a scale that affects entire armies. But you did control it. Because you were there. Because somehow our connection provided the stability I needed. Her expression grew more serious. But what happens next time? What if there are more attacks, more situations that require this level of response? Before Marcus could answer, High Counselor Aldrich arrived with a contingent of nobles, all of whom looked at Lyanna with expressions ranging from awe to terror. Lady Lyanna, Aldrich said carefully, what you accomplished tonight has saved the Empire. We are profoundly grateful. But? Lyanna asked, clearly hearing something in his tone. But power of this magnitude raises questions about appropriate oversight and control measures. Marcus felt anger flare in his chest. Control measures? She just saved your entire kingdom. Indeed. And we're grateful. But surely you understand that abilities of this scope require careful management to prevent unfortunate accidents. You mean you want to control her again, Marcus said bluntly. We want to ensure that such power is used responsibly. No. Lyanna's voice carried new authority that made several nobles step back unconsciously. High Counselor, I've spent my entire life having my abilities feared, suppressed, and managed by people who saw them only as threats to be contained. Tonight proved that those abilities can save lives when used properly. Indeed, but nothing. She moved to stand beside Marcus, and he felt that electric connection strengthened between them. Marcus chose me not despite my power, but because he saw potential where others saw only danger. His trust allowed me to finally use my abilities safely and effectively. Lady Lyanna, Aldrich said more urgently, surely you recognize that power of this magnitude cannot go unregulated. It won't go unregulated, Marcus interrupted. It will be regulated by the person who possesses it and the partner who supports her, not by a council of people who are too afraid to understand it. The nobles exchanged glances that spoke of political concerns and fear of changes they couldn't control. Captain Thorn, said Lord Cassius, one of the more influential council members, you are not qualified to oversee magical abilities of this scope. And you are? Marcus asked pointedly. Your conventional defenses couldn't even scratch the Shadowborn. Your magical specialists were helpless. But somehow you're qualified to manage abilities that just saved your entire civilization. Lyanna stepped forward, silver light beginning to flicker around her hands, not threateningly, but as a clear demonstration of the power under discussion. Gentlemen, she said with calm authority, let me make something very clear. I am no longer the frightened, suppressed woman you offered as a consolation prize. I am someone who has discovered that my abilities can be extraordinary forces for protection when paired with the right partner and used with proper intention. And what are your intentions? Aldrich asked carefully. To use my power to protect those who cannot protect themselves, to work with Marcus to develop new approaches to threats that conventional methods cannot handle, and to ensure that no one ever again has to live in fear of abilities they don't understand. Marcus felt profound pride as he watched his wife transform from someone who had been offered as a burden into someone who commanded respect through demonstrated capability and moral clarity. You're talking about fundamental changes to how the Empire handles supernatural threats, Lord Cassius observed. Yes, I am. Lyanna's smile was confident and slightly challenging. The old ways assumed that power must be either suppressed or controlled by others. I propose a third option, power used responsibly by those who possess it, supported by those who understand it. And if the Council disagrees? Lord Cassius asked. Then the Council can explain to the people of the Empire why they chose to suppress the person who saved them from annihilation, Marcus said evenly. I'm sure that will be a popular political position. General Corvin, who had been listening intently, stepped forward. High Counselor, with respect, Captain Thorn and Lady Lyanna have demonstrated capabilities that exceed our military's ability to handle threats like the Shadowborn. Perhaps the question isn't whether to control these abilities, but how to best integrate them into our defensive strategies. Aldrich looked between Lyanna, Marcus, and the general, clearly recognizing the political reality that his position was becoming untenable. What do you propose? He asked finally. Partnership, not control, Lyanna said firmly. Marcus and I will work with the Empire to develop new defensive protocols for supernatural threats, train others who may have similar abilities, and provide protection when conventional methods are insufficient. In exchange for freedom to use our abilities as we see fit, without oversight from people who don't understand them, Marcus replied. And recognition that power shared between willing partners can be more effective than power suppressed or controlled by fear. Lord Cassius frowned. This sets dangerous precedents. What happens when others with unusual abilities demand similar autonomy? Then maybe it's time to reconsider whether suppressing people's abilities out of fear is actually keeping anyone safe, Lyanna said pointedly. How many other people like me have spent their lives hiding what they can do because they're afraid of being controlled or eliminated? And how many threats could have been stopped sooner if those people felt safe enough to use their abilities constructively? Marcus added. High Counselor Aldrich was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing political calculations that Marcus couldn't fully follow. Very well, he said finally. Lady Lyanna, Captain Thorn, the Council authorizes you to act as special liaisons for supernatural threats to the Empire. You'll have the resources and authority needed to develop new defensive approaches. And the freedom to operate without micromanagement from people who are afraid of what we can do? Lyanna asked. Within reasonable bounds. No, Marcus said firmly. Not within bounds set by fear. We work with you, not under you, or we don't work with you at all. The noble. 2 years after the night that changed everything, Marcus stood in the courtyard of what had once been an abandoned wing of Valdris Fortress, watching as his wife instructed a mixed class of Etherian and human students in the principles of responsible power usage. The Academy of Integrated Abilities had grown from a desperate wartime innovation into something that was reshaping how both civilizations approached supernatural talents. Remember, Lyanna was saying to a young Etherian woman whose hands glowed with healing light, power shared willingly is always more effective than power used in isolation. Find someone you trust and practice channeling through partnership. The student nodded and turned to her human partner, a former soldier who had discovered an unusual ability to sense life force fluctuations. As they worked together, their combined abilities proved far more effective than either could achieve alone. "She's extraordinary," said Ambassador Kane, the human diplomat who had replaced Marcus in formal negotiations with the Aetherian Empire. "In 2 years, she's identified and trained more gifted individuals than the Empire found in the previous century." "That's because she's not looking for people to suppress or control," Marcus replied, watching as Lyanna moved between student pairs, offering guidance and encouragement. "She's looking for people who can contribute. And the results speak for themselves. The integrated defense protocols you've developed have stopped 6 separate supernatural attacks with minimal casualties." Kane paused, studying Marcus with curiosity. "Any regrets about the career change?" Marcus considered the question. Trading diplomatic missions for a life of training people to use dangerous abilities safely could hardly be called a conventional career path. "None whatsoever," he said honestly. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of General Corvin, who approached with the quick stride that indicated urgent business. "Marcus, Lyanna," he called as he joined them, "we've received intelligence about a new threat. The Void Covenant is planning something significant, multiple coordinated attacks using entities we haven't encountered before." Lyanna looked up from her instruction, her expression shifting to the focused alertness that Marcus had learned to recognize as her combat mindset. "What kind of entities?" she asked. "Life force devourers, but more advanced than the Shadowborn. Our intelligence suggests they can drain energy from multiple targets simultaneously and use it to enhance their own capabilities." Corvin activated a holographic display showing disturbing tactical analyses. "Conventional defenses are completely ineffective, and our magical specialists estimate that stopping them would require someone with abilities at least equivalent to yours." "Just mine?" Lyanna asked with a slight smile. "Yours and Marcus's combined capabilities," Corvin corrected with answering humor. "Though I confess I still don't entirely understand how your partnership works." "It works because we trust each other completely," Marcus said simply. "Lyanna doesn't have to worry about controlling her power because she knows I can provide the stability she needs. I don't have to worry about being overwhelmed by energy I can't handle because she knows exactly how much I can channel safely." 2 years of practice haven't hurt either," Lyanna added, dismissing her class with instructions to continue their partnered exercises. "When we first discovered our compatibility, it was largely instinctive. Now it's become something we can use with precision." "Precision enough to handle multiple enhanced devourers?" Corvin asked. "More than enough," she said with confidence that would have been impossible during her years of suppressed ability. "But General, I'm curious about something. These entities, they're specifically designed to counter life force manipulation, aren't they?" "According to our intelligence, yes. The Void Covenant has apparently been developing them specifically to neutralize abilities like yours." Marcus and Lyanna exchanged glances that carried 2 years' worth of tactical communication. "They're still thinking in terms of containing or countering individual power sources," Marcus observed. "Instead of recognizing that our real strength lies in what we've built here," Lyanna agreed, gesturing toward their students, who were achieving remarkable results through partner training. "General, how long before the attack?" "Estimated 48 hours. "Perfect. That gives us time to coordinate with our graduates." Lyanna's smile was confident and slightly anticipatory. "The Void Covenant is about to discover that we're no longer just 2 people with unusual abilities." "What do you mean?" "We've trained 37 partnership teams over the past 2 years," Marcus explained. "Each team combines different types of abilities in ways that enhance both partners' capabilities. You're talking about coordinated supernatural warfare on a scale that's never been attempted," Corvin said with growing comprehension and excitement. "We're talking about proving that partnership-based power usage isn't just more effective than individual efforts, it's more effective than any suppression or control-based system could ever be," Lyanna corrected. "The Void Covenant thinks they're attacking 2 people. They're actually attacking an entire network of trained teams. Over the following 48 hours, Marcus watched as the Academy transformed into a coordination center for the most unusual military operation in recorded history. 37 partnership teams, each with different combinations of abilities, worked together to create overlapping fields of protection that covered not just Valdris, but the entire surrounding region. When the attack came, it was indeed unlike anything they had faced before. The Life Force Devourers were larger, more intelligent, and far more dangerous than the Shadowborn. But they had been designed to counter individual power sources, not the coordinated network that Lyanna and Marcus had built. Team 7, enhance the Eastern Barrier, Lyanna directed through their communication network. Team 12, channel through the southern anchor points. Everyone else, maintain steady power flow. Marcus, serving as the primary anchor for the entire network, felt the incredible complexity of coordinating dozens of different power sources into a unified defensive system. 2 years ago, the effort would have been impossible. Now, it felt natural, dozens of trained partnerships working together with the precision of a symphony orchestra. The Devourers, designed to overwhelm individual defenders, found themselves facing a defensive network that grew stronger as more teams contributed to it. Within 3 hours, entities that should have been unstoppable were dissipating under the coordinated assault of abilities they had no framework for countering. Impossible, came a transmission from the Void Covenant forces. How are they doing this? Partnership, Marcus replied over the open channel, knowing that Lyanna would appreciate the psychological warfare aspect. Something your people have apparently never learned to do effectively. In the aftermath of their victory, as teams of exhausted but triumphant students celebrated their success, High Counselor Aldrich approached Marcus and Lyanna with an expression of profound respect. "What you've accomplished here goes far beyond military defense," he said. "You've created an entirely new model for how abilities can be developed and used constructively. We've proven that power shared willingly is more effective than power hoarded or suppressed," Lyanna corrected. "And we've shown that people with unusual abilities can be assets to their communities rather than threats to be managed. The implications are staggering. If this approach can be scaled up." "It can be," Marcus said confidently. "We've already received requests from 12 other systems to establish similar academies. And we're going to accept those requests," Lyanna added. "Because what we've built here isn't just about defending one fortress or one empire, it's about changing how power is understood and used throughout the galaxy." As the celebration continued around them, Marcus reflected on how his choice of the weakest woman in the marriage line had led to this moment, a transformed empire, a new understanding of supernatural abilities, and a partnership that had proven more powerful than anyone could have imagined. "Any regrets about your reward choice?" Lyanna asked, echoing Ambassador Kane's earlier question. Marcus looked at his wife, confident, powerful, surrounded by students whose abilities she had helped them discover and develop safely. And then at the fortress that had become the center of a revolution in how power could be shared and used constructively. "Just one," he said with a grin. "What's that?" "I regret that it took me 30 seconds to choose you instead of 30 milliseconds. Lyanna's laugh carried joy and power in equal measure, and as their students joined in, Marcus realized that sometimes the best rewards were the ones that initially appeared to be risks, especially when those risks turned out to be the foundation for changing the world.